Hey, hey! So I just did a video about labeling directions and how what we do is we give our emotions an excuse to. So what do we do when it comes to emotions? We give our emotions an excuse. So hear me out. When somebody says our emotions are all over the place, that they're coming from someplace, right? And then you kind of lose control over them. But ultimately, I think our responsibility is where our emotions are stuck, and those are the triggers of life, right? So just labeling the directions you're going, like how are you feeling today? How is life going for you? Ups and downs, or like going back to do something or moving forward. These kinds of labelings, right? I'm a bit off track. How, right? Like how do we get to decide all this shit? How do we get to kind of like create the plan where we look at it and we go like, this is the plan. This is what I want to do. It's all expectations based, and it's all kind of like opinions, and opinions are formed from something, and this something is no longer like I am no longer making these opinions. I'm allocating these opinions to a characteristic of me, which is basically the ego, and I'm utilizing that to move forward instead of like allowing life to kind of like express itself. So it feels like anytime we're using these directional labels, what effectively we're doing is we're anchoring our emotions to something, so that if really like my favorite expression is like, it's in Arabic: ما كل ما يتمناه المرء يدركه تجري الرياح بما لا تشتهي السفن. It's not everything that man wishes for he realizes, because the winds might flow in a way that the ships don't like, right? Back then they used to sail. So if it's either favorable wind or not favorable wind. But ultimately, if I'm moving from here, I'm gonna reach there. So like I'm gonna have to find a way around the wind, or just not move until the wind changes, and stuff like this. And it feels like when we're placing ups and downs, what we're doing is we're kind of like allocating feelings to the wind's changing. Like, if you're in the middle of the ocean and the wind is moving in the opposite direction, can you afford to feel upset? If you don't go and handle the sails, because that's what the moment requires from you, what happens is basically the wind will take you somewhere else. If you don't change direction, if you don't understand that the wind has changed, if you don't acknowledge your position in the middle of the ocean, or in regards to the wind and all that stuff, you really kind of like fuck yourself over. We're not. I don't think we're as lucky as being on a ship in the middle of the ocean, but metaphorically speaking, that's really how we are. Because like where we are right now, when it comes to our life, it's is either where we want to be or where we need to be. If it's where we need to be, that means there's a lot more stuff that needs to be done. But if it's where we want to be, that kind of means that you've created your flow, and like with everything you do, you're kind of like you're you're enjoying it in a way that allows you to accentuate. I can use that word here. Is it a word? It feels like a word. Yeah, like create, explore the accent of your life. Like the story becomes different, the day becomes different, the mood becomes different, the sounds become different, the taste becomes different. That kind of like feeling. Like, I want to be here right now. I am where I want to be actually. So, so I was talking about that, and it was like super fun for me to realize a few things. And I hope this video right now, innovation, consider the how. Consider how the tree innovates. Uh, I think it's related. And the reason I say that is because, or at the very least, I'm approaching it with the same mentality of my previous video. So that's the flow that I was talking about, right? You create a certain setup and you kind of like flow a couple of videos and you explore this train of thought. The train of thought rhymes among the videos because I start looking at each video in a very different way. But so speaking about like the like being stuck and having to change basically whatever you're doing in order for you not to be stuck in the middle of the ocean just because the wind is not favorable to you. I would say it's the same for a tree. And anytime you plant a tree, it just really explores its way to the sun. It is really like the only thing it does until it's big enough to have flowers and bear fruit. So, one way or another, we can say that trees, the seed's vision is to be a tree that has fruits. Its vision is that. And if you plant it in a place in the darkness, uh, and even like a little bit of sun, you can always see the tree moving in the direction of the sun. And I planted a lot of like trees, shrubs, all kinds of stuff throughout my day. I lived in Africa for like 10 years. I loved working in the jungle. I loved working in the bush and planting and just like working with fruits. And there's a whole, it really just like a tree would just go up, and if it sees a wall on its side, it will extend the branch in the opposite direction. And it feels like they do that without hesitation, right? Because like what needs to be done right now? I'm gonna go this way. And it's funny because like sometimes the branch gets too long and actually breaks. But wherever it breaks, the tree kind of like grows thicker and the whole trunk goes thicker and then it starts going up. And by the time they kind of reach on top of the wall where they can actually get the sun, right? So if you're imagining I plant a seed, here's the wall, I plant the seed, and here's the sun. It will extend beyond the shade to reach the sun first. And if it breaks, it starts going up. And as it actually, like when it starts getting to a place where there's actual sun, what happens is the entirety of the trunk kind of starts like molding itself or strengthening itself to handle the rest of the tree that would actually start bearing fruit and carrying flowers. Now it's funny because I wrote innovation, right? Like consider how the tree innovates. How does the tree innovate? It literally like follows the light. It just sees where its vision is and consistently adapts as it gets closer to it. And I said it, and I think I'm actually happy I said it this way because like you're always adapting, not really changing, because we impose change on ourselves. When you say like you want to change, I don't think that's natural because I think change is the natural way of things. So you can't want to change. By doing that, what you're doing is you're imposing certain a change on you. It probably will not really like harmonize. And the last thing you want is to be fully guarded when it comes to this life, right? The last thing you want is to impose something on yourself, and if it works, to stick to it, because then you would have probably developed like that ego that only handles things a certain kind of way, and eventually, like you, a part of you would always be broken. A part of you would always be kind of like left behind. Probably the truth behind who you really are would even get neglected. And so, innovation is very much the adapting, the adaptation to anything that could happen. Like while I was explaining it, like the branch would actually extend to reach the light, but if it extends too much, it might actually break. So the tree then approaches it differently. And there's a specific plant that I actually planted once. It was fucking beautiful. And I loved how it grew because I planted it at the bottom of an actual tree because I brought the whole tree from the bush and it fucking died. So I planted a seed at the bottom of it. And as the tree grew, it grew trying to kind of like maneuver itself to get more sun because it's still under the like it's still the shade of the trunk. And it was beautiful how it kept moving until one day like it moved until one day it broke. But when it did, like three sprouts came out, and it felt like this breakage allowed the trunk to like extend a bit thicker instead of just relying on the sun and take whatever it's getting until it became thicker, and then three came out, and then it spread to create this like beautiful shade as it like became majestic. Fucking love this shit, man. So innovation. what is innovation if not for us kind of like, well, the innovation is the mother of needs, of all needs. And you kind of realize that this is something that needs to happen, and so you approach it. This is something that needs to kind of like that that is a that is required for support, or that is required for the movement. And the only way you realize that is when the change that's happening is no longer compatible with you, but it's going to happen regardless. So it kind of like exposes you in order for you to adapt. So you don't really change, you adapt to the change. Fuck, the entirety of this video, man, went from innovation to change. But like ultimately, that's basically it. Because when you're innovating, you're kind of like creating something, you're adding something, you're removing something, or you're just like kind of taking a step back and looking at the decisions that are in front of you and practically just saying, hey, something else needs to be done that's not already there. And then so something comes up or something just kind of like gets created. I got to talk about trees, so this is a good video. Hey, it's a video. Bye, babies.